My name is Megan Bolser, and the pioneer I chose is John B. Watson. His founded theories are classical stimulus response behaviorism and emotional conditioning. John Brodus Watson was born in 1878 in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, to Emma Roe Watson and Pickens Butler Watson. Watson's early years were difficult. His father, Pickens Watson, was an alcoholic who eventually abandoned the family. This event left a permanent mark on John, who never forgave him. His mother, Emma Watson, was a deeply religious woman who did her best to hold the family together. In 1890, she moved them to Greenville, South Carolina, hoping for better opportunities. Growing up in poverty and isolation, Watson learned to rely on himself early. He experienced little emotional support and minimal affection at home. Some believe this played a role in shaping his later attitudes toward parenting and emotional development. Watson started school late and was seen as a troublemaker. He even earned the nickname Little Devil. Over time, he began to focus on his education and showed determination to succeed. In the early 1900s, John B. Watson married Mary Ikes, the daughter of a well-known Midwestern family. Interestingly, Mary had once been one of Watson's students. Together they had two children, Mary, who they called Polly, born in 1905, and John, who was nicknamed Little John, born in 1908. Unfortunately, the marriage was far from happy. Watson carried emotional distance into the relationship, and the situation was made more complicated by his previous involvement with a woman named Vida Sutton. This lingering connection created ongoing tension in the marriage. While Mary's family suspected that John was unfaithful, they did not have proof, at least not at first. These suspicions would eventually be confirmed, leading to one of the most publicized personal scandals of Watson's career. And the situation escalated when love letters between Watson and Rosalie Rayner were discovered. The Ikes family arranged a separation, and by December 24th, 1920, Watson and Mary were officially divorced. Just 1 week later, on December 31st, 1920, Watson married Rosalie Rayner. The following year, in 1921, they had their first son, William, known as Billy, and in 1924, they had their second son, James, known as Jimmy. Sadly, in 1935, Rosalie Rayner became ill and died at the age of 36. John was distraught over his wife's death. Watson entered Furman University at just 16 years old. Initially drawn to religion by his mother's hopes that he'd become a preacher, he instead pursued psychology and philosophy, earning his master's degree in 1899. Watson continued his education at the University of Chicago, choosing it over Johns Hopkins to avoid more Latin and Greek. He studied under influential figures like John Dewey and Jacques Loeb, developing an interest in experimental psychology. Initially studying philosophy, Watson found Dewey's teachings too abstract. Instead, he shifted to the study of animal behavior, especially rats, which reflected his rural upbringing. Watson's dissertation, Animal Education, argued that complex behaviors didn't require a fully developed brain, which challenged previous ideas. This work laid the foundation for his focus on observable, measurable behavior. He worked himself to the point of nervous overexhaustion and took a month-long vacation in Michigan to recover. During his time at Chicago, Watson immersed himself in both teaching and research. His work was innovative, especially in the field of comparative psychology. Watson's experiences at the University of Chicago were formative. Not only did he develop his core belief in psychology as a natural science rooted in observation, but he also laid the groundwork for what would later become known as behaviorism. His academic success there, combined with growing reputation as a serious researcher, led to his next big opportunity. his appointment at Johns Hopkins University in 1908. Watson taught at Johns Hopkins, where he became the chair of psychology department, and established a comparative psychology lab where he conducted infant behavior studies and pioneered human conditioning experiments. He then published the Behaviorist Manifesto in 1913 and conducted the Little Albert experiment in 1920 with Rosalie Rayner. The scandal surrounding his affair forced him to resign from Johns Hopkins in 1920. Still, he remained influential through public lectures and popular writing. In the 1920s, Watson was still very much in the public eye. He published Behaviorism and co-wrote a parenting book with Rosalie that became a bestseller. His straightforward, practical advice struck a chord with many readers. A key turning point in John B. Watson's career occurred in 1913 when he published his groundbreaking article titled "Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It." In this work, Watson declared that psychology should be a natural science grounded in the observation of behavior rather than study of unobservable mental processes. Watson firmly rejected introspection, the method of examining one's own thoughts and feelings, because he believed that mental states such as thoughts, emotions, and consciousness were unscientific and could not be reliably measured. He famously criticized introspection as being vague and unverifiable. Watson's theory was built on several core assumptions. He argued that all behavior is learned from the environment, embracing the concept of tabula rasa, or the idea that individuals are born as a blank slate. According to Watson, behavior results from stimulus-response associations. He believed that emotional reactions such as fear or love could be conditioned through repeated experiences. Crucially, he asserted that internal mental states are not necessary to explain human behavior. What matters is what can be seen and measured. Watson's revolutionary idea became known as behaviorism, and Watson is credited as its founder. He shifted the field of psychology away from introspection and toward measurable, observable behavior. One of Watson's most well-known and controversial studies was the Little Albert experiment, conducted alongside Rosalie Rayner at Johns Hopkins University. The subject was an 11-month-old boy believed to be named Douglas Merritt. The primary objective of the experiment was to demonstrate that emotional responses, such as fear, could be conditioned in humans. Watson and Rayner aimed to extend the principles of classical conditioning previously shown in animals to human behavior. During the procedure, little Albert was initially shown a white rat, which appeared to like it interacted with without fear. However, the rat was then repeatedly paired with a loud, startling noise created by striking a steel bar with a hammer. After several pairings, Albert began to cry and tried to avoid the rat. Eventually, his fear generalized to other white furry objects, including rabbits, dogs, fur coats, and even a Santa Claus mask. The experiment raises several significant ethical concerns. By today's standards, there was no informed consent obtained for Albert's participation. Additionally, there was no effort made to decondition or reverse the fear that had been instilled. As a result, the study may have caused lasting psychological harm to the child. Ivan Pavlov's research on classical conditioning had a significant influence on John B. Watson. Pavlov's work inspired Watson to explore whether similar principles could be applied to human behavior as well. Watson believed that all behaviors, even emotional responses like fear or love, could be conditioned in the same way Pavlov had conditioned salivation in the dogs. This belief led directly to Watson's most famous study, Pavlov's influence also helped shape Watson's broader perspective that psychology should focus on observable behaviors rather than unmeasurable mental states. This idea became central to the development of behaviorism as a dominant psychological theory in the early 20th century. Edward L. Thorndike significantly influenced John B. Watson's development of behaviorism. Thorndike's research, especially his law of effect, demonstrated that behaviors followed by satisfying outcomes are more likely to be repeated, while those followed by unpleasant outcomes are less likely to occur again. This focus on observable behavior and measurable consequences aligned closely with Watson's belief that psychology should be a science rooted in external observable actions rather than internal mental states. Thorndike's emphasis on learning through trial and error helped lay the groundwork for Watson's view that behavior could be shaped and controlled through environmental stimuli. After leaving his academic career behind due to a personal scandal, John B. Watson transitioned to the world of advertising. He moved to Connecticut where he worked for the J. Walter Thompson Advertising Agency. John B. Watson passed away in 1958 at the age of 80. By the time of his death, his work had left a lasting legacy on the field of psychology. Although his ideas were later expanded upon and challenged, Watson is still remembered as the founder of behaviorism and a key figure in shaping psychology into a more scientific and objective discipline. By understanding behaviorism, teachers can better manage classrooms, support positive behaviors, and design environments that promote academic success, especially for students who thrive with structure and clear expectations.